Welcome to Chateau-sur-Mer, a prime example of High Victorian architecture and one of the first Gilded Age mansions in Newport, Rhode Island. Before the Vanderbilts built Marble House and the Breakers, Chateau-sur-Mer helped set the tone for the lavish Newport mansions that would soon follow. Originally built as an Italianate villa, this house was later transformed into a French Second Empire masterpiece by Richard Morris Hunt, the same architect who would go on to design some of Newport's most famous Gilded Age homes. So this Victorian house is truly a trendsetter in Gilded Age design and architecture, and today it's only open for house tours for just a few months out of the year, making this one an extra special treat to see. Originally built in 1852 and lived in by the same family for more than 100 years, this time capsule home is truly a Victorian design feast for the eyes. Inside, we'll explore the richly decorated interiors, dramatic architecture, intricate woodwork, layered textiles, which features some William Morris original designs, and other influences throughout from the aesthetic and arts and crafts movements. Chateau-sur-Mer feels like a work of art in itself and helped shape Newport into one of America's most iconic Gilded Age destinations. So it's no surprise why it was used as one of the filming locations for HBO's The Gilded Age. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate vintage interiors, historic preservation, and the stories that keep these homes alive. If you love historic house tours, hit that thumbs up, and also make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the incredible homes I've been working so hard to bring you. Now let's step inside Chateau-sur-Mer to explore the mansion that helped define Newport's Gilded Age. The story of Chateau-sur-Mer begins with William Shepherd Wetmore, the man who built this house in 1852. Wetmore made his fortune in the China trade, a world of global commerce that brought tea, silk, porcelain, spices, and luxury goods into American homes. But like many fortunes from this period, there is also a more complicated side to that story. Wetmore's firm was involved in the opium trade as well, which was illegal in China and had devastating effects on Chinese society and the country's economy. So while Chateau-sur-Mer is incredibly beautiful, it also reminds us that many Gilded Age fortunes were tied to global systems that were far more complex than the elegant homes those fortunes created. William Shepherd Wetmore had become wealthy enough through commercial shipping and the China trade that he retired at just 46 years old. His family life, however, was much more complicated. After losing his first wife and child, William later remarried Anstice Derby Rogers, and together they had 3 children, William Jr., George, and Annie. But Anstice eventually left the family, rumored to have run off with the family coachman. So scandalous, and leaving William to raise the children on his own, largely with the help of household staff and trusted family friends. That detail becomes especially meaningful as we move through the upstairs rooms later on, because this house was also shaped by the children who grew up here. After William Wetmore's death, the house passed on to his son, George Peabody Wetmore. George grew up here, along with his brother William and sister Annie, and this house remained the center of his life for decades. Because he inherited his father's fortune, George did not have to spend his life building a business in the same way his father had. Instead, he was able to live the life of a gentleman, devoting himself to travel, art, culture, politics, and public service. He married Edith Kettletos, and together they made Chateau-sur-Mer not only a family home, but one of Newport's great social and political gathering spaces. And this is where the house becomes such an important part of Newport's history. Before the Vanderbilt mansions transformed Newport in the 1890s, Chateau-sur-Mer was already hosting the kind of lavish events that helped define what Newport society would eventually become. When George Peabody Wetmore was elected governor of Rhode Island, he and Edith opened the estate for a massive celebration, inviting people from across the state to come here. Thousands of people came, and that was a huge moment because for many, it was the first time the public had ever been able to step inside one of Newport's grand homes. So this house became a place where family, politics, society, wealth, and spectacle all came together. George went on to serve Rhode Island for decades, first as governor and later as a United States senator. He moved between Newport, New York, Washington, and Europe, but Chateau-sur-Mer always remained as the central family home. After George and Edith died, their daughters Edith and Maud continued living here and preserved the house in its High Victorian style. And that preservation detail makes this home even more special. Because by the mid-20th century, many homes like this were being stripped, sold, demolished, or completely changed altogether. But Edith and Maud understood that Chateau-sur-Mer was special, and they wanted to preserve its unique style. They were collectors, preservationists, and members of the newly formed Preservation Society of Newport County. In fact, one of the earliest meetings of the Preservation Society was held right here inside the home. So in a way, this house didn't just become part of Newport's preservation story, it helped inspire it. The Wetmore family lived here for more than 100 years, through the rise of Newport's Gilded Age and the height of its social world, and eventually the fading of that era. And because the family held on to Chateau-sur-Mer for so long, the house stands as a time capsule preserving grand architecture, historical spaces, family memories, social history, and the story of the people who lived in this home, entertained in this house, protected it, and made sure future generations could step inside a piece of design and architectural history for generations to come. When Chateau-sur-Mer was completed in 1852, it immediately stood out compared to the smaller wooden cottages Newport was known for at the time. This was a grand year-round residence built out of Fall River granite, a durable New England stone that gave it a sense of permanence, making it feel like a family home versus just a summer retreat. Before the Vanderbilts built Marble House and the Breakers, Chateau-sur-Mer was considered one of the most palatial homes in Newport. It helped introduce the idea that a Newport residence could be a place of architecture, status, entertainment, and display. During the 1870s renovation, George Wetmore hired Richard Morris Hunt to transform this house. Hunt gave the house a grander, more European feeling, with French Second Empire details, steep mansard roof lines, richer exterior decoration, and brought it all together in a much more dramatic style. Hunt's renovation transformed it from an elegant Italian villa into something more theatrical, closer to the feeling of a French chateau, with the scale and confidence that would come to define Newport's Gilded Age neighborhood. And Richard Morris Hunt would go on to become one of the most important architects of Gilded Age America. He later designed the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, the facade and Great Hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and some of Newport's most famous mansions, including Marble House and the Breakers. So in many ways, Chateau-sur-Mer gives us an earlier look at the architect who would help shape the world of the Gilded Age itself. Chateau-sur-Mer is a masterclass in High Victorian design, where almost every surface feels considered. The dramatic staircase, carved woodwork, layered wallpapering, painted ceilings, stenciling, ceramics, and revival-style details all work together to create a house that feels like a work of art. The name Chateau-sur-Mer translates to castle by the sea in French, and even though the ocean is not directly beside the house today, the name still captures the feeling the home was meant to create originally. When the house was first built, the surrounding landscape was much more open, and the Atlantic wouldn't have been blocked by other homes. It would have had a direct view of the ocean, where the water felt part of the estate itself. This was a period when design pulled from history, nature, travel, art, and cultures from all around the world, then brought those ideas together in rooms that felt rich, expressive, imaginative, and deeply personal. That's why Chateau-sur-Mer feels so different from some of the later Newport mansions. The Breakers and Marble House feel polished, grand, and intentionally palace-like. Chateau-sur-Mer, on the other hand, feels more layered, more mysterious, and deeply more Victorian. There's a sense of discovery here, where every room reveals another pattern, another texture, another influence, and another glimpse into the world that helped shape Newport before the height of the Gilded Age. Chateau-sur-Mer preserves a moment when Newport was becoming the Newport as we know it, when a seaside town of cottages was beginning to transform into one of America's most iconic destinations for Gilded Age mansions. And for fans of HBO's The Gilded Age, even the exterior might look familiar to you. Chateau-sur-Mer was used as part of Mrs. Astor's Newport summer home, which feels so fitting for a house that helped set the stage for the way we see Newport today. This was originally the morning room, but it's now the space where you check in for your tour. Something that instantly caught my attention in here were these Minton tiles around the fireplace, designed by Walter Crane, one of the founders of the arts and crafts movement. They are absolutely stunning and capture the seasons. They really set the tone for what we're about to see when we continue to walk through the house, and all of the different design influences we're about to uncover. During the 1870s renovation, George Wetmore hired Richard Morris Hunt to transform this house, and this 3-story hall became one of the biggest changes he made. The staircase was moved, he blew out the 2nd and 3rd floors, the center of the house opened up, and he created the tower on the exterior of the house. The end result was the Great Hall, a towering atrium that pulls your eye all the way upward. This Great Hall was practice for the Great Hall that was designed in the Breakers, which Richard Morris Hunt would design later. So Richard Morris Hunt, the most prominent Gilded Age architect of the time, used Chateau-sur-Mer as practice for when he would later design some of the most iconic Gilded Age mansions in the country. The library gives us a much more personal look at George Peabody Wetmore's world. This room was designed as a gentleman's retreat, a place for reading, collecting, studying, and showcasing personal objects that showed off his taste, education, and worldliness. And you can feel that from the moment you step inside. The room is dark, rich, and incredibly layered, with carved wood bookcases, leather-bound books, a large central table, warm lamps, heavy drapery imported from England, and George's portrait displayed on an easel right in the room. One of the most important parts of this room is the woodwork itself. In the 1870s, George Wetmore brought in Luigi Frullini, who created many of the carved wooden elements seen throughout this library. You can see his craftsmanship in the pilasters, the fireplace, the bookcases, the furniture, and the Renaissance-inspired ornamentation throughout the room. Every detail was meant to make a statement. The arabesque patterns, the rich surfaces, and the old-world feeling all help to create an image of sophistication. This was the kind of room that told visitors that George was not simply wealthy. He was educated, cultured, well-traveled, and connected to a much larger world of art and history. It's not minimal, it's not simple, it's richly layered with meaning, texture, symbolism, and exquisite craftsmanship. And in this library, you can really see how this home was intentionally designed to be beautiful. It was a house filled with rooms that reflected the identity of the people who actually lived here, what they valued, how they wanted to be seen, and the kind of world they wanted to create for themselves. This room is known as the Marble Hall Gallery, but when Chateau-sur-Mer was originally completed in 1852, this was actually the original entrance hall to the home. So imagine arriving at the house through this space, stepping inside from the west side of the mansion, and immediately being surrounded by marble floors, dark woodwork, rich colors, paintings, sculptures, and that dramatic Victorian sense of atmosphere. Later, after Richard Morris Hunt redesigned the house and created a new formal entrance, this earlier entryway took on a different purpose. In the early 20th century, the original front door was replaced with the bay window we see here today, designed by architect John Russell Pope, and that change completely shifted the feeling of this room. Instead of just being a passageway into the house, it became more like a small gallery, a place for artwork, sculpture, and display, and you can feel that intentionality within this space. What I love most here, though, is the ceiling. The flowers, leaves, patterns, and borders are all woven together in this colorful, beautiful design, and it feels so connected to the aesthetic movement of the late 19th century. The idea was that beauty should not be limited to a painting hanging on the wall. Beauty should be everywhere throughout a home, on the ceiling, the woodwork, the floors, the furniture, the lighting, and the tiny little details surrounding you. No surface was left untouched, no area for creative detail was spared. And this room really shows how Chateau-sur-Mer evolved over time. It began as the main entrance to the original house, then became part of a much larger and more layered mansion as tastes changed, technology improved, and Newport interiors became more elaborate. This space reminds us that the house kept changing with the family, with fashion, and with the world around it, while still holding on to the richness and artistry that make it one of Newport's most fascinating Victorian interiors. This room was known by the Wetmore family as the Gold Salon, and it's one of the most special rooms inside the house. It's the Ballroom. Completed in the 1850s, this was one of the first French-style designed interiors in Newport, and it remains one of the few spaces George and Edith Wetmore did not dramatically change during later renovations. So when we step into this space, we are seeing one of the earliest layers of the house, closer to the world William Shepherd Wetmore originally created when Chateau-sur-Mer was initially built. And it's absolutely stunning. The walls may look subtle, but they were painted in 7 different tones of gray, then highlighted with gold leaf and delicate plasterwork. The effect is elegant, stunning, and much more refined than some of the darker, heavier Victorian rooms we see elsewhere in the home. The room was designed with French influence in mind, inspired by the kind of courtly interiors associated with Louis XV style and grand European salons. Leon Marcotte specifically designed these pieces for this space. There's 4 original pieces to the original suite of furniture that's in here. This banquette and 2 sofas were original to Chateau-sur-Mer, and the other pieces in the room were acquired to help supplement the space's original interpretation as it would have looked 100 years ago. His work helped bring this kind of high-style French interiors into wealthy American Gilded Age homes. Before the Vanderbilt Mansions arrived here, Chateau-sur-Mer was already showing people what luxury could potentially look like. And these large plate glass mirrors are absolutely stunning. Mirrors on this scale were a major statement of wealth at the time. They were designed after the great mirrored rooms of European palaces, like the Palace of Versailles' Hall of Mirrors, where reflection, candlelight, and gilded surfaces all work together to create a spectacle. And before electric lighting, those mirrors would have helped brighten the space. The chandeliers and gas lamps would have reflected across the room, making the Gold Salon one of the brightest and most magical spaces in the house. You can just imagine how this room must have glowed during an evening party, with the lights bouncing off the mirrors, gold leaf, marble, crystal, and polished floors. William Wetmore hosted a famous party here in 1857, with thousands of guests gathering at the estate. George Wetmore's sister Annie was married in this room, and later George and Edith held debutante balls for their daughters. When George was elected governor of Rhode Island, the family opened the estate for a massive celebration, and thousands of people came here. So much of Newport's social history passed through this room: weddings, debuts, political celebrations, formal receptions, and the kind of lavish entertaining that helped define Newport before the height of the Gilded Age, setting the stage for what was to come for this era and for this city. What I love most about this room is that it feels so graceful rather than overwhelming. There's something soft and almost romantic about it. The pale gray walls, the gold details, the mirrors, the chandeliers, and the way everything seems designed to catch and reflect light. This is where Newport's Gilded Age was beginning to take shape, through architecture, design, entertaining, and rooms just like this, created to impress the moment guests walked inside. The Green Salon is a lovely continuation of the French-inspired design ballroom we just saw. This was a space for receiving and for entertaining guests, a more comfortable space meant for conversation and visiting. George and Edith Wetmore commissioned Ogden Codman Jr. to redesign this room in the Louis XV style. Codman was part of the Newport summer world himself, and he became one of the great tastemakers of the Gilded Age. To him, good design was about proportion, restraint, elegance, and looking back to the refined rooms of 18th century France. And you can really feel that in here. The soft green fabric, gilded details, curved furniture, delicate plasterwork, tall draperies, mirrors, lamps, and marble fireplace all give the room such a graceful and almost feminine vibe. There's a softness to the colors and a lightness to the decor that feels very different from the other spaces that we've just seen. This room shows how tastes were changing by the end of the 19th century, moving away from heavier Victorian layering towards something more ordered, balanced, and European. That shift connects directly to Codman's work with Edith Wharton. In 1897, the same year this room was completed, Codman and Wharton published The Decoration of Houses, a book that helped shape the way wealthy Americans thought about interiors and interior design entirely. They believed rooms should be beautiful but also carefully composed, with architecture, furniture, color, and decoration all working together. The green salon feels like that idea brought to life. And that's also a little hint at where I'll be taking you next week. So stay tuned. In 1945, George and Edith Wetmore's daughters, Edith and Maud, helped host the first meeting of the Preservation Society of Newport County here. And that is such an incredible full-circle moment, a room once created for Gilded Age entertaining, later becoming part of the movement to save Newport's historic architecture. So when we look at the Green Salon, we're actually looking at a space connected to changing ideas of taste, the influence of Ogden Codman and Edith Wharton, and the beginning of the preservation work that allows us to walk through these mansions today. The Great Hall is one of the most dramatic spaces in this house. During the 1870s renovation, George Wetmore hired Richard Morris Hunt to transform this house, and this 3-story hall became one of the biggest changes he made. The staircase was moved, he blew out the 2nd and 3rd floors, the center of the house opened up, and he created the tower on the exterior of the house. The end result was the Great Hall, a towering atrium that pulls your eye all the way upward. This Great Hall was practice for the Great Hall that was designed in the Breakers, which Richard Morris Hunt would design later. So Richard Morris Hunt, the most prominent Gilded Age architect of the time, used Chateau-sur-Mer as practice for when he would later design some of the most iconic Gilded Age mansions in the country. The dining room was added during Richard Morris Hunt's 1870s renovation when the house was being transformed into a grander High Victorian mansion. And after seeing Frullini's work in the library, you can immediately recognize that same level of artistry here. Luigi Frullini designed much of this room as well. The carved woodwork, the sideboard, the serving tables, the fireplace, the ceiling, the dining table, the chairs, and even the smaller stools in here. The result is a room that feels completely immersive with masculine undertones. The table itself could expand in both length and width, seating up to 24 people. So this was a room made for serious entertaining, the kind of formal dinners where the table, the silver, china, food, and the room itself all became part of the experience. One of the most important pieces in a 19th century Victorian dining room was the sideboard. It was designed to be one of the main focal points, used for serving but also for display, a place to show off silver, ceramics, glass, and beautiful objects that reflected the family's taste and wealth. And this sideboard is incredible. It's covered with carvings connected to feasting and abundance, fruit, flowers, game birds, and Bacchus, the god of wine, looking over the room. You can see that same theme around the fireplace. The mantel was carved from Circassian walnut, with grapes, mythical figures, and imagery connected to food, wine, hunting, and celebration. Even the tiles around the fireplace continue the story. They show a hunting scene with hunters and hounds moving towards a stag. In Gilded Age dining rooms, imagery like this was very intentional. Hunting scenes connected the room to old European traditions of country homes, aristocratic sport, masculinity, and the idea of the table as a place of power and ceremony. The walls are another amazing detail in here. They're covered in decorative leather that was stamped, silvered, and painted with flowers and vines. Over time, the silver has darkened and softened, but when this room was new, those walls would have shimmered in the light. Just imagine this room at dinner. Lamps glowing, silver on the sideboard, candles on the table, the leather walls catching the light, and all of these carved fruits, animals, vines, and figures surrounding the guests. It must have been magical. The ceiling above was painted by Annibale Gotti, an Italian artist working in the Renaissance Revival style. And even there, the theme continues, with imagery tied to food, drink, and celebration. That's what makes this room feel so immersive. Nothing here feels random. The carvings, leather walls, tiles, ceiling, table, sideboard, and furniture all work together to bring you right in. A dining room about abundance, ceremony, craftsmanship, and display. So when we look around this room, we're seeing the height of Victorian entertaining, where dinner was both a social event and a performance. Just off the dining room is the pantry, and this is where we get a glimpse behind the scenes of all of that formal entertaining. After Richard Morris Hunt enlarged the house in the 1870s, the service areas of the home were addressed and made much more efficient. The kitchen was moved to the basement below, and food would come up by the dumbwaiter before being plated and prepared here, right before it was carried into the dining room. So after seeing that incredibly grand dining space, this room helps us understand how much work it took to make those dinners feel effortless. Although I was bummed we couldn't see the kitchen, it isn't offered as part of the tour. But just look how beautiful these built-in cabinets are. Many of the pieces on display are similar to what the Wetmore family would have used for an 8 o'clock dinner, when every plate, glass, serving dish, and silver piece had a purpose. Some of the stemmed water and wine glasses belong to the Wetmore family, and many are still being accumulated and brought back into their home. At any given time, the Wetmores employed around 15 servants, led by an English butler. Many of the household staff were immigrants from places like Ireland, Scotland, and Sweden. There were also gardeners, grooms, a coachman, lady maids, kitchen staff, and servants working throughout the house and the estate. So this room reminds us how much of life at Chateau-sur-Mer depended on people whose work was meant to be smooth, quiet, and mostly invisible. And this is the hallway where the staff worked tirelessly to keep this place running. I'm sure it was a very busy space. In the stair hall, which was added in the 1870s by Richard Morris Hunt, we see a 3-story fresco mural of the Tree of Life on the underside of the staircase. As a symbol, the Tree of Life represents the cycle of life, immortality, and it also represents the center of the universe, making this a perfect central focal point of the house. It starts with the base of the tree right near the front entrance that goes all the way up the stairs to the 3rd floor. You can see this beautiful painted world of greenery against a blue sky. The mural continues upward through the 2nd and 3rd floors, growing as the staircase rises, and it goes all the way to the ceiling and becomes almost part of the architecture in the way it's designed. It depicts vines, leaves, fruit, insects, and branches, and then it eventually opens into sky and birds flying above. A whole host of flora and fauna is represented here, bringing the outdoors directly inside. These ceiling paintings were done as frescoes, so as the plaster dried, the color became sealed into the surface, meaning that the artwork literally became part of the house itself. This was a house where every surface was touched by an artistic hand. The walls, ceilings, stairs, glass, woodwork, tiles, furniture, everything. The mural continues upward through the 2nd and 3rd floors, growing as the staircase rises. It starts with the vines, leaves, fruit, and branches, and eventually opens into sky and birds above. Near the staircase, there's also 2 bronze female figures dressed in Japanese kimonos. One carries a fan and the other holds cherry blossoms, reflecting the fascination with Japanese-inspired design that became so popular in the late 19th century. That mix of influences is what makes this room feel so distinctly High Victorian. There's English Eastlake design, Japanese inspiration, Moorish-style lanterns, painted glass, carved wood, Italian fresco work, and this incredible sense of vertical drama all happening in one single space. And from here, you get such a beautiful view of the Tree of Life, turning even the ceiling into something creative and alive. As we come up to the 2nd floor, you can really feel how Richard Morris Hunt influenced the experience of the central spaces here at Chateau-sur-Mer. Instead of a closed-off upstairs hallway, the house opens into this dramatic atrium with balconies looking down into the great hall below and light pouring in from the painted glass skylight above. It draws your eye upward through the center of the house, almost like the whole interior is unfolding as you climb up. This is the Butternut Suite, George Peabody Wetmore's childhood bedroom suite. We first enter through this smaller dressing room, which has its own little details that can't go unnoticed. As a young man, George might have changed clothes several times a day, from tennis outfits, afternoon writing, dinners, or whatever the next part of the day required. Even getting dressed had its own rhythm and ritual. The bedroom itself gets its name from the light-colored butternut wood used for the woodwork and matching furniture. Butternut is a type of walnut, and compared with some of the darker rooms downstairs, it gives this space a warmer, softer feeling. The bed is especially personal because it has George's initials carved into the headboard, tying the room directly back to his roots, and to him personally. One of the most interesting design elements here is the wallpaper in this suite. In the 1920s and 30s, George's daughters Edith and Maud redecorated many of the second-floor rooms. The original Victorian wallpapers were removed and the rooms were painted in lighter colors that felt more fashionable at the time, but thankfully, they saved the samples of the original wallpaper and donated them to the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York City. Those samples became incredibly important during a 1970s restoration project where they were able to replicate the wallpaper, allowing the rooms to regain much of its original Victorian look. And for fans of HBO's The Gilded Age, this room might also look familiar. The Butternut Suite was used as Oscar Van Ryn's New York apartment, a perfect set filled with moody old world design elements, which I think perfectly matches his character. This room was Annie Wetmore's dressing room, part of her bedroom suite. Annie was George Peabody Wetmore's younger sister, and she grew up here at Chateau-sur-Mer, along with her brothers William and George. After all of the grand public rooms downstairs, this space feels much quieter and more personal. You can see the softer wallpaper, the framed images, and all of these small little objects that make the room feel connected to daily life. In the photo displayed here, we see the Wetmore children with Eliza Mitchell, the family's housekeeper. The Wetmore children grew up without their mother in the home. Anne Stiss separated from the family when Annie was still very young, and their father, William, was often away for business. And it's rumored that she ran off with the family coachman. Eliza Mitchell likely served as both a housekeeper and as a governess, helping care for the children and creating some sense of order and comfort inside this enormous house. And Eliza clearly mattered to the family. William Shepherd Wetmore even provided for her in his will, which tells us how she was viewed within the family household. In the next room, we step into Annie's bedroom. Like her brother George's room, Annie's furniture suite was made especially for her, and her bed also has her monogram on the headboard. The bed and matching armoire are made of maple and burled walnut, giving the room a very rich, layered look. What I love most about this room is that it feels elegant but still very intimate. The lace coverlet, floral fabrics, blue curtains, dressing screen, and small pieces displayed throughout the room make the space feel very lived in. Annie eventually took a grand tour of Europe and later married William Watts Sherman in 1871. Their wedding took place right here at Chateau-sur-Mer, with hundreds of guests filling the house and the entire estate for the celebration. But Annie's life was sadly cut short. She died of pneumonia in 1884 at the young age of 35, leaving behind 2 young daughters. This is the Turkish Room, which George and Edith Wetmore used as a private sitting room. This room feels such like a colorful little escape and such a nod to eclectic Victorian design. The blue floral wallpaper, deep velvet drapery, tassels, pink upholstered seating, and all of the layered textiles give the room a soft, almost exotic feeling. In the 19th century, Turkish was often used as a broad term for rooms inspired by places like the Middle East, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and parts of Asia. It wasn't historically accurate, but it was a Victorian interpretation, filtered through travel, collecting, fashion, and imagination. And at the time, having a room like this suggested that the family was educated, worldly, well-traveled, and aware of international design trends. Rooms like this became a way to display culture and taste through the objects, patterns, and influences gathered from abroad. It was a place for sitting, reading, conversation, and enjoying the impressive views of the property from the second floor. This is such a perfect example of High Victorian design, where every room had its own personality, its own atmosphere, and its own little world going on within it. In the Wetmore family's day, the built-in cabinets along this level would have held books, family photographs, mementos, and personal objects from travels. It's one of the quieter areas that helps the house feel very lived in. You can imagine someone pausing here, passing from bedroom to bedroom, or stopping to look at a photograph or a keepsake in the hall. After the grandeur of the rooms downstairs, this second floor gives us a softer view of the home, welcoming us into the more personal spaces of the mansion. This bathroom might look small, but for the 1850s, it was incredibly modern. The glazed tile, mahogany details, deep bathtub, washstand, and flushing toilet all go back to the original house that William Shepherd Wetmore built here. The bathtub has a beautiful mahogany rim, and the toilet has a matching mahogany lid. There's also a stained glass skylight above, added around the time George Wetmore was updating the house in the 1870s. Originally, sunlight would have come directly through that skylight, filling this little room with an abundance of natural light. But when the house was expanded again and the third floor was added above, that opening was covered. Today, the light shining down is electric, recreating the feeling of what would have once been daylight. The stenciled wall decoration is another amazing revived detail in here. It was original to the early period of the house, later rediscovered and then carefully restored. Even a small bathroom held onto the layers of this home's history. And here's a really cool fact also, the floor and the wall tiles come from the same company that furnished the first-class bathrooms on the Titanic. That gives you a sense of how forward-thinking and luxurious this bathroom would have felt at the time. This was George Peabody Wetmore's bedroom during his adult life, and it's one of the most untouched rooms in the house. After George's death, his daughters Edith and Maud intentionally chose not to redecorate this space. They kept it just as their father had designed it, almost as a tribute to him and his legacy. So this room gives us a very rare glimpse of George's personal taste when he created this home. The style here is connected to the aesthetic movement, which grew out of the Eastlake style that we saw earlier. And once you start looking closely, you can see pattern everywhere and the evolution of design happening in here. This gleaming gold checkerboard design across the ceiling, with a band of swallows flying around the crown molding, the birds and branches on the wallpaper, and a soft willow leaf pattern surrounding the alcove where the bed sits. Everything is just spectacular. That willow design was also created by William Morris, one of the most influential figures connected to the arts and crafts movement. Morris believed deeply in the beauty of handcraft, natural forms, and traditional artistic skill, at a time when industrial production was making objects and decor more common. He wanted everyday surroundings to still feel human, thoughtful, and beautifully made. And honestly, that idea feels very relatable today. There's always been this fear that human creativity could be replaced by something faster, cheaper, and less personal. Morris was pushing back against that. He believed the things we live and surround ourselves with, wallpaper, furniture, textiles, books, and rooms themselves, should still carry the touch of an artist's hand. The whole room feels like it was meant to surround George with a quiet, more reflective kind of beauty. Connected to George Wetmore's bedroom is Edith Wetmore's bedroom, and this room immediately feels softer, lighter, and more feminine. For wealthy couples during this time, separate bedrooms were very common. Edith's room is also larger than George's, which tells us something about the role a lady of the house played inside a home like this one. Her bedroom was a private space, but it also functioned almost like a personal office. This was where she could write letters, manage invitations, review household manners, receive close friends, and conduct the quiet social work that helped keep a house and a family like this running. Edith's bedroom furniture, like her husband's, was purchased from Gregory & Company of Regent Street in London. The wallpaper is a direct copy of the original French paper, and the ceiling was elaborately stenciled with layers of pattern and color. At the foot of the bed are two low blue slipper chairs. These were designed close to the ground, making it easier for a corseted woman to sit and change her shoes. A small detail that says so much about comfort and daily life for women during the Gilded Age. Edith herself seems to have been a fascinating woman. She was known for her beauty, but also for her independence and strength. There's a story floating around that she once caught the attention of the Prince of Wales, and when he continued to pursue her, he sent her an invitation to which she replied with a simple, "No thank you." And honestly, that little story makes me like her even more, because in a world where society, appearances, and powerful men mattered so much, Edith seems to have had a very clear sense of herself and didn't want to waste her time with a womanizer. Good on her. And just beside the bedroom is Edith's boudoir, or her dressing room. This is where she would have prepared for the day, surrounded by all of the little tools and rituals expected of a woman in high society. There would have been brushes, combs, mirrors, powder, makeup utensils, perfume, hair accessories, and all of the small personal objects a Gilded Age lady needed in order to look the part. By the end of the 19th century, this room was redecorated with colonial revival paneling and blue and white fireplace tiles, showing how even the private rooms here in the home continued to change as tastes of the world evolved. After all of the bold High Victorian rooms we've been looking at, Edith's suite gives us a quieter look at the house and an idea of her personal style. Chateau-sur-Mer is such a remarkable house because it shows us Newport before the mansions became larger, flashier, and more competitive. Room by room, you can see how the Gilded Age was beginning to take shape through architecture, craftsmanship, entertaining, travel, art, and the belief that every surface could be treated as an opportunity for beauty, leaving no corner untouched. What I love most about this house is how deeply Victorian it feels, through its layered, dramatic, imaginative, and full personality displayed through design. The carved woodwork, painted ceilings, patterned wallpaper, glittering mirrors, rich textiles, and all of the unexpected design details just all come together to tell the story of not only a house, but also a family who lived here, and a time in history when Newport was transforming into one of the most glamorous destinations in the country. And because the Wetmore family held on to Chateau-sur-Mer for more than 100 years, so much of that preserved history is still here for us to experience today. That's what makes time capsule homes like these so incredibly special. They hold the stories of the people who built them, lived in them, worked in them, restored them, and cared enough to preserve them, allowing us to step inside, learn from the past, and find design inspiration in the beauty that they left behind. I hope you enjoyed this incredibly special tour of Chateau-sur-Mer, and thank you for watching, being here with me, and supporting the mission of keeping these historic places alive. Let me know in the comments below which room or detail stood out to you the most, and if you love historic house tours like this one, please hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe. I have so many more incredible homes coming your way, and you're not going to want to miss out. I'll see you next week when we step inside the home of a legendary American writer who helped shape the way we think about beautiful interiors. And trust me, this is one you will not want to miss. So make sure you're subscribed for next week's tour, and until then, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.